Christ is in our midst. Welcome to Spiritual Calisthenics. Today on October 9th, we commemorate the third Sunday of Luke, James the Apostle, son of Alphaeus, Andronicus and his wife Athanasia of Egypt, as well as Poplia, the Confessor of Antioch, and, of course, the patriarch Abraham and his nephew Lot. So regarding St. James, the Holy Apostle James was one of the 12 and preached Christ to many nations and finally suffered death by crucifixion. O Holy Apostle James, intercede to our merciful God that he may grant our souls forgiveness of sins. The wondrous fisherman that caught in the nations, James, the most venerable of Jesus' disciples, and the companion of the apostolic choir, doth dispense unto the world the great wealth of his healings, freeing from adversities them that rightly claim him. Wherefore we cry to him with one accord, O blessed Apostle, save us all by your prayers. Regarding the husband and wife, which is, of course, not a rarity, but it's something that's not as focused on as much. Saint Andronicus and his wife Athanasia of Egypt lived in Antioch in the 5th century. Saint Andronicus was a craftsman who divided his earnings into 3 portions. One part he gave to the church, the second to the poor, and the third he used for his family. When the Lord took the son and the daughter of Andronicus and Athanasia, the pious couple decided to devote themselves fully to the service of God, helping the poor and the sick. Now, can you imagine this? These are people that, when we tithe, we're supposed to give 10% of what we give to God. And so 10% would be, 1/10 of all we have. They're giving 1/3 to God, to the temple, to the church. 30%. Another 30% they're giving to the poor. Now, many people would count giving to the poor as part of giving to God. So whether they were giving 10% to the church, they might say, well, they give 5% to the church and then 5% to charitable organizations such as those that give to the poor. They would not consider that to be a separate thing. So they are tithing 60% of their goods, 66%. And then on top of that, they still lost their children. And yet instead of despairing, by saying we've given everything to God, they continue to have faith and show themselves to be a model for us. Soon the saintly spouses set out for Alexandria, where Andronicus entered a Skete monastery, and Athanasia entered the women's Tabernicita monastery. After 12 years of asceticism, the life of St. Andronicus went to Jerusalem to pray to the holy places. He met a co-pilgrim, St. Athanasia, who, foreseeing the difficulties of the journey, had donned men's attire. They did not recognize each other, since long ascetic effort had altered their appearance. When they returned from Jerusalem, both monks settled into a single cell and for many years lived the ascetic life in silence. St. Athanasia wrote a note to be read after her death, revealing her secret. St. Andronicus died soon after St. Athanasia. So what a beautiful thing that the two of them, after their children had passed, both went into monasticism. They both decided to dedicate their life to prayer. And yet, after all of this, they were reunited again for a number of years in prayer, as almost brother and sister in their life. And they were together. So God kept them and their love strong, even though they did not realize who the other was. How beautiful. The Holy Patriarch Abraham, born a pagan 10 generations after Noah, when the knowledge of God had perished from among men, became the beginning of God's dispensation for the universal renewer and salvation of man. He was called out of his country, the land of Chaldees, that is Mesopotamia, to the land of Canaan, and received the promise that through his seed all nations of the earth should be blessed. Through his singular faith in the promises of God, he was justified before the giving of the law and the coming of grace. Through his willingness to sacrifice Isaac, he portrayed the love wherewith God loved the world in sacrificing his only begotten Son. The greatness of Abraham and the trials that he and his righteous nephew Lot underwent are set forth in the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, chapters 12 through 25. We also commemorate them on the Sunday of the Holy Fathers between December 11th and 17th. In the night universal of ignorance towards God, and in the starless profound gloom bereft of heavenly light, you, O Abraham, were kindled in the firmament, burning with a bright star-shining faith in the everlasting light, who shone forth to us from your seed. Do you entreat him with fervor that he enlighten us and save our souls. The servant were you, a mortal fashioned from the earth. Your master was God, creation's Lord and fashioner. Yet, well pleased to glorify your celestial greatness, the Lord of all called himself the God of Abraham. Procure for us mercies from your merciful Lord. May we all enjoy the faith of Abraham. Going into the readings for today, for the third Sunday of Luke, St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. Brethren, you are the living temple of God. As God said, I will live in them and move among them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. Therefore come out from them and be separate from them, saith the Lord, and touch nothing unclean. Then I will welcome you, and I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. Since we have these promises, beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from every defilement of body and spirit, and make holiness perfect in the fear of God. So holiness is not separating ourselves physically from other people, as much as it is separating ourselves from evil, from the ways of evil people, whether it is greed, whether it is idolatry, whether it is lust. These are the things we separate ourselves from. We keep far away from those things. And when we separate ourselves and become children of God, we become like God, taking on His qualities. At that time, Jesus went to a city called Nain, and His disciples and a great crowd went with Him. As He drew near to the gate of the city, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, He had compassion on her, and said to her, Do not weep. Now, this is important because what Jesus Christ is about to do is very singular. He's going to raise her son. Now, this shows us that Christ our God knows what we can and cannot handle. And so He is using this as an opportunity not only to show Himself as Lord of the living and the dead, but also to show His absolute compassion and understanding of what we can and cannot handle. So, for example, when we saw what happened to Andronicus and Athanasia, we see that He understood that they were able to take this, that they were able to continue, whereas this widow could not. And so when He says, Do not weep, and He came and touched the bier, and the bearer stood still. Now, the reason why they stand still is because the Jews have a very profound method of taking care of the dead, where they unwrap the body and they wrap it in its burial trappings, all while their hands are underneath sheets, because it is considered defiling to touch the dead. If you touch something dead, a person that is dead, then you have to go through rites of purification. You have to leave the town until you are deemed clean, worthy to come back into the presence of the people. And so when Jesus Christ touches the bier, touching the thing that is holding the death, that is considered extremely defiling. That is extremely dirty as far as they would be concerned. And yet this is important because Jesus Christ is showing that He has the power to destroy the filth of death, because He is life itself. And He said, Young man, I say to you, arise. And the dead man sat up and began to speak. And He gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, saying, A great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited His people. This is very, very important because we are seeing that Jesus Christ is showing His power over the dead. Now, this is very, very important too, because this is going to factor into later the raising of Lazarus, because when people are doubting this miracle, because of obviously the people here, they know, they understood that this man was dead. But whether it was raising Jairus' daughter, who had died within like an hour of Jesus Christ raising her from the dead, or this man, because remember, the Jewish people, they have to bury their dead within 24 hours. There is not an embalming process here, so they have to be buried very quickly. So people might have said, well, was he really dead? Maybe he was in a coma. These are important because Jesus Christ healing the little girl, the immediacy of death, this man within a day of his death, and Lazarus 4 days after his death, shows us that Jesus Christ is with us at every point of death, and that He is with us to raise us to glory and life. I hope that you've enjoyed today's Spiritual Calisthenics. Have a blessed and wonderful day.